So this article comes from ABC in Australia. It says grains analyst missing as China shuts down information on failed crop. Now, this comes as we've had a couple of stories leaking, so to speak, out of China that they're having a grain shortage. So let's read through this together. Key points. It says a Chinese grains analyst has reportedly been jailed and another is said to be under house arrest. This is a common thing that they do in China. If you say anything that the party doesn't like, you're going to jail or you're going to end up dead, or they're going to push you out of a building and say you fell. They did that with somebody last week. I saw it on Twitter. We'll keep going. It says Australians grains analysts say China is suppressing information about grain shortages to keep world prices down. China is buying up near record amounts of grain while reporting a bumper crop of its own. Let's read this. China's decisions around its agricultural policy are becoming increasingly murky with news of arrests, secrecy, and claims of cover-ups. Independent analysts who report on China's grains industry have reportedly been arrested and their online businesses shut down to stop them from telling the truth about the country's below-average crop. Chinese officials are cracking down on independent information about grain pricing. There are reports that analysts working in Beijing for respected grains reporting firm Coverup have been arrested or are under house arrest. Another company called JCI, based in Shanghai, also appears to have had an employee arrested. It says here, information on China is hard to get. Yeah, no shit. Andrew Whitelaw from Thomas Edler Markets says it's very difficult to get reliable details about what's happening in agriculture in China. The market information out of China is so blatantly propaganda. So why do we believe them about COVID? Why do we believe them about their COVID numbers? They lie about everything. They lied about their pork shortage last year. Like, it's the same story. It's laughable, literally laughable. The only way to find out is to have someone on the ground who you know is genuinely trustworthy. Mr. Whitelaw says it's harder than ever to get accurate information out of China. The first sign of problems with JCI and CoFeed came in April when data stopped flowing online. In the course of one night, probably a month or so ago, CoFeed just stopped revising data and the reports of police tape outside their offices. He says that according to information he sees online, the head of JCI is reportedly in prison while the head of CoFeed is under house arrest. So it's interesting. So the government will just literally come in and say, okay, we don't want the world to know that we're having a shortage of grain. We want to keep prices where they're at so we can buy as much as possible. Let's just shut these guys down so they can stop reporting the shortage. It says world grain prices and domestic chaos. Nick Crundall, a senior strategist from the Australian firm Market Check, thinks the Chinese authorities probably want to allay domestic fears about supply and limit the amount they will have to pay for imported grains. They don't want the whole world to know that they need grain and that they are in a bit of strife. So they very closely regulate the information that is released. Speculation about problems with crops in China can be a huge driver for world prices, but it also has implications domestically for the government. It creates all sorts of food inflation problems and them having to pay more for imported grain. So the Chinese are very strict on going out there and telling the world there's just no issues. Mr. Whitelaw says the signals from China indicate authorities are either nervous about the harvest or worried about the supply of grain and corn. They've said they've had a record harvest, but they're importing record amounts of corn. They've put options for corn from the U.S., and they're buying Australian wheat. China's gone from importing 6 million tons or less of corn, and that's up to 25 million tons. So it's up 4 times what it normally is. That's crazy. You just don't import things if you don't need to. Australia is not going to import kangaroo meat anytime soon because we've got plenty. Mr. Whitelaw says grain shortages are a real concern for countries with large populations. He pointed to Egypt in 2011, where things got out of hand due to grain shortages. The price of bread doubles, and you've got riots on the streets because food prices are too high. Someone famously said every country is only 4 meals away from anarchy. So this whole article is interesting. I'm going to put the link to this here in the chat for you guys if you want to continue to dig on your own. But why I wanted to share it with you guys is because I think it's just another point that we can use as reference when we talk about the misleading information that continues to come from China. And even within their own country, what they tell their own people is not normally the truth. What percentage is true versus what percentage is not? At this point, I would say most of the things that they're telling us outside the country, what they let out to the world, and what they're telling the people that live in their country is probably not true or a stretched truth at best. We have COVID to point to. We have the pork shortage. Now we have this grain shortage. More of these issues that China has and tries to cover up, the more of them that will continue to kind of bubble. And eventually, one of them, like this one, will come out. Look at all the other issues that they've suppressed. The information about the Uyghurs, the information even from their billionaires. They've locked up billionaires because they don't want them to be able to leave the country or share information about China. And then on top of that, you know what China's doing to infiltrate here in America, and you know that Chinese wind farm we always talk about in Texas. So all of these things are happening at the same time. And I think it's just, again, a point of reference that we can point to where China uses manipulation tactics to assert its way just another level higher on the power hierarchy within global economics. So what do you think of this? Is this not that big of a deal? Is it maybe not true and they're just getting rid of these analysts for no reason and they just don't want to report the numbers? Or do you think this is a bigger issue than we're probably giving credence to right now in public media here in the States and around the world? And if this is real, I think it could be headline news in the next couple of weeks. If they're having a real grain shortage when the harvest comes in short, and then they're continuing to import 4 times the amount of grain that they normally do in corn, someone's going to see this. Someone's going to start throwing flags. If we're talking about it here on my live stream, somebody else knows about this. I'm sure the government knows about this. So what are we doing to watch the price of corn and watch the price of grain? It'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the next few weeks for sure.